What's going on, everybody? Welcome to PFF's live NFL preview show. So glad that you guys are here hanging out with us. Trevor Sikkema, Sam Monson, Ian Hartitz, Eric Eager. Fellas, how are we doing on this beautiful NFL Sunday?
I mean, I'm looking forward to the games, even though I think a lot of people don't think they're going to be very good. I think there's a lot of compelling storylines. There's going to be some teams that we're going to find some things out about today.
I feel like you always create the storylines with how you bet, because you were rattling off the endless list of different bets that you had throughout the week, which I'm sure we'll get into as the show goes on. But even if it's a down NFL week, there's plenty of ways to make money, is there not?
That's part of it. Like, to an average fan, might not be the most fun, but to us, we're going to make it fun.
That's why the bets are involved, right? You got to spice up the action. Sometimes you get to a random week 8 and the games aren't great. So Eric is betting, family members' items of jewelry, betting the neighbor's house. Like, these are
dog.
That's how you get the excitement going.
We've gotten cocky, guys. We've had 7 straight NFL Sundays. We forget what it's like not to have an NFL Sunday. So this is still better than anything.
This is true. We got to the point, I feel like, a couple of weeks ago where people were like, oh, college football, like, this is a down week. Like, how could you be watching this game? And I'm like, you guys
Week
forget.
0 last year.
We forget.
We were all pumped about Austin P. Central Arkansas. Like, we gotta think about it.
You gotta remember.
Think happy thoughts,
When the going gets tough, we always got to remember Austin P and Arkansas. That's something that we live by here. We have Kendall Valenzuela here with us as well over on the bar set. Kendall, how are you today?
Hello. I'm doing well.
You and I talked before the show, and you are in a very interesting fantasy predicament.
It's a horrible fantasy predicament. It's not even fun. I'm starting Geno Smith, Ian.
Oh no.
It's horrible. It's horrible. I don't know what to do. And then on my bench I have Jared Goff. So really, it's just kind of like
one of those cry for help things?
Yes.
Like,
yes. 1,000%.
Like
I am crying
blink a
for
million
help.
times if you need help.
It's sad. So yeah, I'm doing well besides my fantasy team. But other than that, it's
But isn't
good.
it like the same for everybody? Like, everybody always talks about weather and games. They're like, oh man, the weather's terrible. It's terrible for both teams, right? Like, in this fantasy, and I'm not an expert like Ian, but it's like in this fantasy week, like, everybody's picking from, in DFS, everybody's picking from the same pool of Samaj Perine.
In the outside effects of the universe, everyone always knows that it will only negatively affect the player that I've chosen. Correct, Ian?
That's
how
you complain about everything in life. When you lose your bet because there's an underdog that came back at the end, like, that happens every single day. It doesn't stop us from betting every single day.
Or when Ohio State doesn't cover the spread despite
whatever.
Yeah.
Still the best team in Ohio.
All right, we are not getting off the rails that quickly. Obviously, guys, Kendall is checking out all the YouTubes, all the tweets and everything. If you guys want to get it on the show, give us your NFL hot takes, whatever it is, get it in the conversation. Kendall's going to be reading all of those and getting them in the show. I do want to start by talking about the AFC playoff picture, because our Cincinnati Bengals, they're at number 1 right now. Raiders at number 2, both of those teams 5-2. The Titans are 5-2. Man, we got some words that we got to say about the Titans. Bills at 4-2, Ravens 5-2 as well at number 5. Guys, I'll open it up a little bit. When you look at that AFC playoff picture, we talk about this every week. We kind of check in on this. Has there been a swing on one of the teams that you really like? And we keep kind of saying, like, hey, are the Bengals the odd man out? And they keep winning these games. Sam, what do you think about this list right now with the AFC?
Yeah, I mean, I think the general consensus is that Cincinnati probably isn't as good as, the number 1 seed or a very for real team by the end of the season. On the other hand, everybody that we thought might be has kind of stumbled or lost a game somewhere along the way. So all of a sudden, the AFC might just not be as strong across the board as it looked earlier in the season, which kind of opens the door for a team like Cincinnati, who don't need to be the best team in the NFL to suddenly rank amongst the elite in the AFC by the end of the season.
Well, and the thing with the Bengals is, like, their schedule looked really hard going in even last week, right? And then when you take a step back and look, it's like, well, Cleveland's not as hard maybe as we thought.
Sure.
Kansas City, who they play in week 17, play them here. That might be a barn burner as well, which preseason that looked like a sure loss. Even like last week, we talked about the Ravens. They were 6-point underdogs to the Ravens. They played the Ravens again here, right, in Cincinnati. And so their schedule does not look nearly as tough as it did, when we were talking about them. Oh, could they? And now you look back also, They took the Green Bay Packers, who are now 7-1, to overtime.
Right.
Minnesota's a lot better than like what we thought in Week 1 as well. That they've done some good things as a football team.
We don't know the exact schedule, or at least I don't know off the top of my head. But let's say 5-6 weeks from now, do we think the Bengals are they don't even have to be at the very top. Like, do we think they're still in contention of the AFC right now?
Yeah, I think they wish that they were in the NFC, right? Where the NFC doesn't have anywhere close.
I think a lot of AFC teams wish that they were in the NFC.
Yeah. There's nowhere near as big of a bench. Like when you look here, one team that's noticeably absent 1 through 7 is Kansas City at 3-4.
Right.
Another team is the previously 12-4 last season Pittsburgh Steelers, who are still a 500 team. There's a lot of teams that I think, if one of these AFC teams, and Indianapolis as well, and teams that falter, like there's teams coming up, right, that could go and take their spot, whereas in the NFC, obviously, that's not the case. So I do think the Bengals have to still continue to play well and win football games, but it starts this week. They get the Jets, and so they're going to go in probably into next week at 6-2.
They should. The Bengals' only 2 losses. Those are playoff teams that are actually in the NFC, I believe. So
how quick you are to write off your competitive Jets.
Oh.
Well, Mike White. Every statement I made about the Jets is both not true and also dependent upon Zach Wilson. So, like, I have an out now.
He's absolved.
I told you guys
washing his hands of this.
I actually have a variable in my model called tanking, and I've applied it to Houston, Detroit, and I actually half applied it to Philly, and I think that's been right. I had to apply it to the Jets. I figured they were going to try this year. And even if they are trying, it doesn't look like it.
The science of tanking now coming in on the show. Let's flip it over to the NFC. When we look at the NFC right now, Cardinals still in that one spot there, but we also have the Buccaneers, we have the Packers, we got the Cowboys. I know there's a lot of words that we're going to say about Dak Prescott as well. Saints, Vikings, all of that. So what do we think about the NFC? You mentioned that you don't think that it's as strong as the AFC is. I think probably top to bottom when it comes to those contenders, but seems like the teams that are at the very top of the NFC are still giving us some really good football. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, I mean, Adam Schefter had that tweet that the NFC has the 5 best outright records in the NFL, which is the first time this has happened since the merger, that this deep into the season, but the top 5 teams by record
I
have
always
been in
love
one
when we
conference.
get a stat that's like since the merger.
Yeah.
It just sounds so powerful.
Particularly when it's somebody else's and you can just steal it for a piece of the show.
Of course, yeah.
But I think legitimately, like those 5 teams, the Cardinals, Buccaneers, Packers, Cowboys, Rams, the teams with 1 defeat each, I think they're all legit. Mm-hmm. And all of those teams have a lot of offense. They have a lot of weapons they can deploy. They all have varying degrees of defense that can show up and be good enough in any given game to beat anybody. Like that 5 group, I think, is going to be like the cream of the NFC all the way through.
Yeah, but if you're one of these teams, if you're the Saints or you're the Minnesota Vikings, like that's where I'm sort of saying, if you're one of these fringe playoff teams, I don't think you have a prayer in January, but to make the playoffs, you actually have a fairly decent thing. Because if you're Minnesota, now their next 4 games, assuming Dak plays tonight, are really tough. But you look who's beneath you. Atlanta 3-3. What do we think about Atlanta? I don't know. They got to win a game today against Carolina. Carolina 3-4. Chicago 3-4. San Francisco 2-4. Seattle 2-5. Now they might get Russ back, and they do have one of the easiest schedules in the NFL. After he does get back, they've gone through the harder part of their schedule. But like, if you're the Minnesota Vikings, you're kind of looking like, well, which one of these teams is going to catch us? You know what I mean? And so while we give them roughly about a 42-43% chance to make the playoffs, it is the highest among those sort of also ran teams. And if you're the Saints, Jameis Winston has a 60% chance to be in the playoffs, folks. That's pretty interesting, and that shows.
It's truly what the people want.
It is what the people want.
January Jameis is what
it does show you why, when the AFC you have an evenly spread out records, and you have good teams that are going to miss the playoffs. In the NFC, you have some bad teams that are going to make the playoffs.
Right.
Are we convinced the Saints are the second best team in the NFC South, though? Because Matt Ryan and the Falcons playing some pretty good football lately, and as much as I love the Jameis experience, when the guy can't really get the ball to anyone other than Alvin Kamara consistently, I do wonder if a team like the Falcons, Cordero Patterson, Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, we got multiple avenues to go with the ball now.
Yeah, but do you think, I mean, the issue with the Saints is like you're getting Michael Thomas back at some point in theory, right? And that is going to be helpful. And your defense is very good and getting more healthy with Onyemata coming back from a suspension, with Davenport, obviously Lattimore, Marcus Williams, Demario Davis. Like, they're a great defense.
They do.
The Falcons defense, I mean, gave up 4 touchdowns to Tua last week. It's gooey, yeah, exactly.
I do have a question with the teams that are at the top. Is there one that really gives you worry? Because you mentioned it's easier on that side of things in that conference, but is there one that you're like, okay, your record's a little bit overinflated, I don't think it's going to last, or are all these teams kind of legit?
Well, I mean, if you just look at point differential, and I know they were super impressive Thursday, winning without some of their best players, but I think the Packers are a team that continue to win games ugly.
Yeah.
And that being said, I mean, you have a really good head coach in Matt LaFleur, 33 wins in his first 40 regular season games. I think that's best all time.
Yeah.
You have Aaron Rodgers, who's a Hall of Fame player. You have the cavalry coming back. You have Bakhtiari coming back. You have Adams coming back.
Right.
Jair at some point coming back, I think. And so maybe like they fortify a little bit, but the way in which they're winning games feels a lot more like the 2019 version, which had a worse point differential than most of the other playoff teams in the NFC, versus last year's team, which sort of blowtorched everybody in the NFC.
Yeah, and I think that difference is Rodgers, right? Like that's the difference between Rodgers playing at an MVP, all-time great level, in terms of PFF grade, above 90, the highest graded quarterback we saw, and good, pretty, very good Aaron Rodgers, but not at that like absurd, untouchable level. And ultimately, it probably ends up in about the same place. Like they won 13 games both those years, lost in the NFC Championship game. I think the Packers will end up being for real record-wise, but the difference between like January Packers, who they can beat in January, is Rodgers.
Thursday night was humongous because it gives them a really good chance to get the 1 seed. And I think that Packers team, to your point, like preseason, I do agree with you. I think in the playoffs, the way the Packers try to win football games is not necessarily that sustainable. When 35% of your targets are going to one player, and that's a pretty like fragile system. When a team like the Saints can go and give you Marshawn Lattimore, or a team like Tampa Bay can sort of bracket the hell out of him. Like to me, that team can win 13 games out of 17, but in a 1-game playoff, it's really hard.
And I think that it's not that we're saying that the Packers can't. Like, it wasn't saying, I wasn't saying preseason that the Packers couldn't win or that they couldn't get there. It's just the margin for error, I feel like. The volatility of how they win is a lot of still on Rodgers' back. And he's obviously a phenomenal talent. He can get you there, but I think it's a little
bit.
The
Bucs have so many more ways to win.
Right. And I think that's a good segue into the quarterback. You mentioned the Bucs. Tom Brady, he is our number 1 graded quarterback right now. Russell Wilson's still number 2 after him. We've got Kirk Cousins. We've got Ryan Tannehill. We've got Derek Carr. That rounds out the top 5. Guys, what do you think about this list here? Anybody that you just know that's absolutely going to be in that conversation when the season's over? I mean, Aaron Rodgers isn't up there. I think that's a big one. But what do you guys think?
Let's get the elephant in the room. We got Kirk Cousins as a top 3.
We have 3 Kirk Cousins in the top 5.
Wait, who's the? Oh, okay. So
Tannehill, Carr, like they're the Cousins.
He does.
And then Kirk himself.
The
original, the OG Kirk Cousins.
Yeah. So I think one of the problems with Kirk is we see how bad he does look from time to time, and that makes it harder to believe that he's as good as he can look from other times. Interesting stat I found this week: 4th most sensitive quarterback in terms of yards per attempt difference when he's kept clean versus when he's under pressure. If you can give this guy a clean pocket, few throw a better ball. The problem, Eric, even if he has to move just a little bit, everything falls
apart.
Well,
and that's the point. I think it's hard because we follow the Vikings pretty closely, and it's like the issue I think became to sign him to win a Super Bowl right after the 2017 year,
right?
And then 2018 was a flop. They tried to basically play him sort of straight up, and they were one of the more inefficient offenses in the NFL. And over the last 3 years, what they've done is engineer an offense that has put Kirk Cousins in position to be super successful. And to Kirk's credit, he's done a great job on the throws that they ask him to do. Now, there are some things like pressure, one of them. In the first the first 3 quarters of games on early downs, only it's basically Ben Roethlisberger, Andy Dalton, and I believe Jacoby Brissett have lower average depth to target in the first 3 quarters of games on early downs than Kirk. Meaning that like early in games, they're just not asking Kirk to do a lot. And then in the 4th quarter, he's become John Elway over the past like year. and the question becomes, and like Vikings fans will ask you, why are they not winning football games if our quarterback is the 3rd highest graded quarterback in PFF? And it's because, and it's not, I don't think it's Kirk's fault. I think it's honestly the offense that team runs, play so conservatively, try to play every game. It's like a hockey team that's trying to like basically play for the draw, get into overtime, get the 1 point. That feels like what the Vikings are trying to do. And then to Kirk's credit, there have been a number of games this year where he's taken them from behind and actually won the game. But I don't know if that's a sustainable way to play football, especially if Dak plays tonight for Dallas.
The average at the target thing is interesting, though, because I don't know how much of that is by design in the offense and how much of it is early in the game. Kirk Cousins kind of automatically trends towards that more conservative, like let's just pick up the easy stuff, and then late in the game when it's all out of hand, it's like, oh hell, we need to start letting rip, and that's when you get the best Kirk Cousins. It's weird though, because like by almost any measure, he has dramatically exceeded what you could have reasonably expected from him when they signed him from Washington right at the start, when they thought he was the piece missing from a championship caliber team. He's gotten better every single year, and the team around him has gotten worse. But it does, when you look at a list like this, and you got Brady number 1, Russell Wilson, then Kirk Cousins, it's sort of like you have this Browns feeling of just waiting for it to like disappear again.
Well, we've seen it before, right? 2019, he was the highest graded quarterback for like a 4 or 5 week stretch in October. So like we've seen this kind of play from Kirk Cousins before. We've seen him get hot. And like you said, it's a sustainability issue. And it's not necessarily Kirk's fault. It's a situation where you have a head coach who does not trust him. And I don't think if Mike Zimmer had Tom Brady, would he trust him? Like, I just don't think.
But that's the chicken and the egg quarterback offense kind of debate. Like, whose fault?
He loved Teddy Bridgewater because Teddy Bridgewater just got his defense back on the field with the same score that he got it, and he would give him a little touchdown every once in a while. But like that was Zimmer, and I
give him a little touchdown every once in a while.
But Kirk can obviously throw the ball to the other team. But as he's shown, Sam's right. I mean, I think Sam's point is like a bigger feather in the cap of you can't pay good, not elite quarterbacks that much money, because Kirk individually has exceeded all expectations. The problem is when you pay him that much money and you concentrate that much risk on that position, and that guy is not a Mahomes, he's not a Brady, he's not a Breeze, something like that, your team falters as a result, and that's exactly what Minnesota has done post-2017.
That feels like where Cleveland is right now, right? I mean, it's almost like they're staring down the barrel of this situation.
It's the decision that they have to make, because right now you're looking at a quarterback who the only conclusion you can have about Baker Mayfield right now is we don't know really where he belongs, but the one thing you're pretty certain of is he doesn't belong in the Brady, Mahomes, Rodgers category of guys that will elevate those.
Which is what the Washington football team knew about Kirk Cousins at the time. Like they knew that like he was he was a good quarterback to date for a few years, but he was not the quarterback to marry. And ultimately, like they gave him to Minnesota, but like. And that's the hard part, and it sucks because like these quarterbacks are good players. There's just not a middle class quarterback contract to give them.
And the Vikings fans will like argue the point that, hey, look, it could have been fine if we'd done this, and this.
And that's the point.
Yeah, and it's not that the Kirk Cousins contract or the Baker Mayfield contract that they potentially are about to sign. It's not that it prevents you from creating this good roster around. It's that it removes all margin for error. Yeah. You can't screw up. You can't make a bad decision anywhere along the line because that's where you run into the problem.
Well, and oftentimes the success that yields these questions are unsustainable, right? So you look at Minnesota's 2015 draft and you're looking at like Donnell Hunter, Trey Waynes, Eric Kendricks, Stephon Diggs. They basically hit on every pick. Right, which 2017 that gets you to the edge of the Super Bowl, and that's the precipice that says we just need to get a quarterback, right? And then of course if you look at Minnesota's drafts after that, they've been a joke. And it's not that 2015 is any different than 2017; it's just noise happens.
Yeah.
And with the Browns, you look at that situation and you're like, this is a really good roster. And the question becomes, okay, was that roster built sustainably, or was it a product of either going all in on guys like Jadeveon Clowney, John Johnson, guys like that, Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, the offensive line? You can't do all those things when you have Baker Mayfield making $45 million a year. And so what part of that goes away, and can you sustain it? Because right now, they're a 500 team basically with all of those advantages in Baker Mayfield. What happens when they pay Baker $45 million?
Yeah, it's a roller coaster of a year, and obviously that's not going to be the last time that we talk about Baker and his contract, because that's a big deal. It's going to define not just Cleveland Browns, but what goes on in the NFL for sure. I do want to talk about some of the best quarterback wide receiver duos that we have so far this season. Tom Brady, Antonio Brown's number one. We do have Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson there on that list. We've got Russell Wilson, DK Metcalf, and then Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. Holy cow, what an absolute stud of a duo that that duo has been so far this season. Guys, what do you think about these top four players here?
I want to ask Eric something that came up, actually. Somebody asked me, does the success that Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase is having right now, like immediately forging the same connection they had in college, where it's clearly better than the sum of both players, right? Yeah. The Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase is better than Joe Burrow or Jamar Chase combined. Does that skew teams in the direction of looking for that more in the draft?
I hope not, because I remember back in the day when it was like Jay Cutler, Earl Bennett, and it was just like, oh, the Vanderbilt connection. And it's like, well, I don't like. I think Jamar Chase is just an amazing player, right? Like you look at Justin Jefferson's on this list, and Justin Jefferson's fantastic, broke the rookie record last year. Jamar Chase was way better than him in college. So I think we're just dealing with a much better football player. And then with Burrow, I think Burrow is just, it's hard to, and we all kind of gave Burrow a little bit of crap last year. I hope the 2021 draft class shows us how remarkable it is for a quarterback to come in on a team like the Bengals in year one and just be as good as Burrow was last year, like a kind of a league average quarterback, how remarkable that is. And then again, the sum of the parts probably is the case in this one instance. The Bengals lucked into a situation where the best player at 5 also had this thing going for him. I would not move a guy up 10 spots on my board just because he had this connection with my quarterback.
I feel it's kind of natural though, right? This isn't necessarily new. It's just at an unreal level. Jamar Chase is having a historic start to the wide receiver position, but drafting guys who played together. That gives you confidence. That makes you feel better when you're in the war room, when you go into an exercise like the NFL draft, which is a crapshoot anyways, a lot more of a crapshoot than we want to admit, and you can kind of convince yourself that you're making the right move because of that.
If it broke a tie between him and Penei Sewell, it was absolutely good to do.
That's what it was to me, right? The coin flip between Penei Sewell and Jamar Chase, I think was real, and you could go either way. To me, if I was the one making the decision, I would have gone with that tiebreaker of, hey, look, either one of these things could be the right thing. On the other hand, look at the connection these two guys had in college. It was ridiculous. Let's just take a chance.
Interesting point about the Sewell Chase thing also. It just shows, I think Sewell can prevent bad things from happening, right? If you were Tampa Bay and you were in the same position, I think Sewell's the right pick because Sewell can prevent that offensive line from going from an 8 to a 2 in 1 year, right? And there wasn't a lot of targets for Chase. The Chase pick was the right pick because it took the Bengals from a below average offense to an elite offense at times, right? That's the promise of wide receiver play is the tail is long, right? Whereas offensive line, it's preventing the tail of being bad, right, on the distribution. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting point. It's not just, I would pick the wide receiver over the tackle most of the time, but you do have to understand the Bengals' goal with this pick was to get out of the 4-12 type seasons, and he's effectively done that.
They were picking 5th overall, and the whole time it's almost been you're either going to have this great player or your team's going to be total trash. Maybe both Jamar Chase and Penei Sewell can help an offense be great.
No, we can't have that. We got to divide people. It's got to be one way or the other.
I will say with the quarterback-wide receiver connection, yes, it's looked great with Burrow and Chase, but we also have Hartitz and Devontae, Tua and Waddle, where they're still very much on the hot seat. So when you have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, rookies who haven't just been great as a rookie, but truly they're already in the top 10, I think, wide receiver conversation, regardless of year, they make it work. But I just think in general, we can go back to the top 10 wide receivers the last few years, not all home runs.
Right, and when you hit though, I think when you hit on a left tackle like Joe Thomas, for example, it can't take your offense out of the depths of horribleness. When you hit on a wide receiver, look at Minnesota's first 2 games last year, they were objectively horrible. Sure. Once Justin Jefferson got into the mix, that offense has become really good. Sure. And I think a wide receiver can sort of take you from, obviously they can bust, and I think that's an issue, but when they hit, they can give you so much more variance in the positive direction than a tackle can when he hits.
Miami Dolphins situation, I think.
Yeah, but that's the backwards thing.
But also one tackle isn't fixing that.
No, correct. And I think that's obviously what you guys are saying here, and that's what makes the one addition, the individual addition of a wide receiver. I don't really think there's any debate. They can help you more than if your whole line sucks and you draft one good tackle. But I do think a lot of people, when the Penei Sewell, Jamar Chase debates were coming in, they didn't exactly believe that the Bengals were going to be able to turn it around as fast as they were. So they were thinking, okay, it's a multi-year rebuild. You're also an offensive line piece, and that's probably how
you're seeing the impact that a wide receiver can have on pass blocking. That's the thing that gets missing in the picture, of which guy, if you don't have the tackle, then you can't get any pass away. What you're seeing now is that having a guy that the quarterback has confidence in, being able to put the ball in the air early, being able to put the ball in the air early to not just Jamar Chase, but everybody, because now they're dealing with number 2 and number 3 corners. They're one down on the depth chart of who's covering those guys. It's better. So the pass blocking with Cincinnati, it hasn't been upgraded. They didn't get a whole bunch of better players, but it's better this year because Burrow is able to deal with it better.
It's the coverage versus pass rush deal. It's hesitation in the pocket is largely caused by play on the outside, and hesitation in the pocket can kill an offensive line.
Well, I think,
you know, definitiveness in the pocket really helps an offensive line no matter how good it is. And I think a wide receiver being as objectively good as Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or, you know, some of these other guys, like, it may, like, if you think about Tampa Bay, like, Tristan Wirfs had a fantastic season, but it's also great that Tom Brady is nothing if not definitive as hell in the pocket. So, like, there aren't plays where, like, the guy blocks it up for the requisite amount of time and he still gives up pressure. If he blocks it up for the requisite amount of time, Brady's getting that ball out, right? He's rewarding good offense.
Confidence is so important with everything, no matter what it is. And if you have that, you're already winning, I feel like, half the battle in a lot of ways.
You're right, though. We got to add a safety, like, into the picture without Chase and then just have him, like, off the picture. And Chase is there because he's hanging out back, so.
All right, speaking of confidence, Kendall, I know you got some fantasy questions for our boy Ian over here.
Yes.
Pepper him. Get into it.
All right, here we go. So who goes off this week, Ian? So we love Dearness Johnson, his story, how he played last week. But Nick Chubb, he's back. Will he go off today?
Dearness Johnson actually tied for our single game highest rushing grade. He was fantastic, but who did the Browns just pay all sorts of money to be their bell cow with the future? That is Nick Chubb. And if you look at the last time, different offense, but when Kareem Hunt was out of the picture in those first 8 weeks of 2019, Chubb was, you know, a quote unquote league winner there, truly playing 80% snaps in almost every single game. When he can get that pass down role, there are very few fantasy football running backs better. So Chubb, he's someone that I think, you know, you're starting no matter what in season long. But guys, like the Steelers defense, they're fine, but I'm not too afraid of them when it's Chubb here and an offense that wants to run the ball, should be playing with positive game script. And again, more so on DraftKings, I think, this week. Don't be afraid to go back to the Chubb well early.
And in DFS, I think Chubb is a kind of actually a contrarian play, given the fact that the total on that game is about 43. So a lot of people just, like, I think reflexively shy away from games that aren't totals in the high 40s or 50s. Like, so he might be a weird play where, like, you have some leverage on him because some people won't have him for all the uncertainty.
First game back from injury, but he's had, you know, more than enough time having the Thursday game last week. He should be 100%.
Do you think that Dearness Johnson performance kind of earns him, you know, a piece of that backfield while Kareem Hunt isn't there? You know, maybe
that's the thing.
Higher role?
Very possibly, but I don't see him taking more than what Kareem Hunt was. And even before when Hunt was there, we're still looking at Chubb getting 15, 20 carries per game. So Chubb's worst case is the role he already had, which we know he can blow up with. Best case is even more work than usual.
And I think that a case that I made, because I was looking at both sides of the coin when it came to paying Nick Chubb, and I was like, okay, you obviously have, like, the negatives for, like, why you wouldn't give a guy that much money, but one of the positives I had is that something you worry about with running backs is injury. And Nick Chubb has proven time and time again that when he comes back from injury, he is almost like superhuman. It's like he just gets back to form no matter what. So I don't think you have to be too worried about that. Right. What else we got, Ken?
All right, next one is Khalil Herbert against the 49ers. I need good news right here, Ian.
So interesting thing happened last week. Damian Williams got activated off the COVID list on Saturday. So there is a small chance that maybe they didn't feel like he was ready to go in his first game back. But we got some reports coming out The Athletic that the artist known as Juice, always a great nickname for a running back, is now just a straight up backup to David Montgomery. And we saw that play out last week. Khalil Herbert has now had 18 plus touches in each of the last 3 games without Montgomery in the picture. We're chasing that volume in fantasy football. This week, not the best matchup against the 49ers, but they've still allowed 100 plus rushing yards 5 of 6 games. And, you know, we talk a lot about running backs not mattering here at PFF, but, like, guys, I think 100 rushing yards against Tampa Bay means something. He's looked good out there.
Yeah, I think it was, you know, by hook or by crook that they were going to get that, because Nagy was very committed to, like, whatever the.
But that's also encouraging, right?
That's a good point.
That goes into it.
A leverage play here, I think, and, like, this is just my personal opinion, I don't think the Niners should be favored by 4 points in this game. So, like, when you look at when you look at this, some people might shy away because of possible game script. If you view this more, I think, soberly, this is a game where it could be more like a pick 'em or a 3, in which case, like, the running back for the underdog matters more.
How hard was it for you to pass up an OJ joke when he mentioned the Juice nickname?
It was very hard, but, you know, there are some lines I don't cross, Sam.
I mean, it's impressive.
I just like how he said when you look at this soberly, like implying that I was just hammered up. These picks.
All right. For our Cincinnati Bengals, will T. Higgins go off today?
Yeah, we all know Jamar Chase is doing his thing, but one of the, I think, points that was lost in that blowout win for Cincy last week was Burrow threw the ball 38 times in a blowout win for them. So it really has just been a struggle of volume for this passing game. Jamar Chase has gotten his. T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd remain great wide receivers in their own right. And specifically looking at Higgins last week, 15 targets, even though he only ended up catching about 5 of them. So just in terms of unrealized air yards, which is basically the difference between your receiving yards and how much just yardage you racked up through the air on downfield opportunities, he had the second most of the week behind only Hollywood Brown. Usually a good indicator that a blow-up could be on the horizon. So guys, look, I know Jamar Chase is a baller, but at some point, Joey Burrow can enable more than one high-end wide receiver.
Yeah, there's going to be a team that does what the Ravens did, which is just like man up him on Marlon Humphrey. But like there's going to be more successful schemes against Chase, and then you're going to have to go to one of these secondary guys.
Right.
I don't think the Jets in an 11-point spread type of game are going to be the team that's going to elicit a lot of passing volume, but you never know.
And even if they're not taking away Jamar Chase, like the fact that Jamar Chase is now garnering this kind of attention, whether it's your number one corner, whether it's like bracket coverage or the entire coverage shell rolling in his direction, anything right now that teams are doing to take away Jamar Chase is good news for T. Higgins.
And Higgins was banged up a little bit at the start of the year. I think he'll start rounding into his group, get him in those starting lineups.
Last one, Kendall.
All right, last one is Chris Godwin. Will he go off today against the Saints?
Yeah, I mean, that's the short answer there. I think looking at this one just really more in terms of matchups, Mike Evans has consistently tracked Marshawn Lattimore over the years, and he's won the battle. We had that Ryan Fitzpatrick blow up in week 1 a couple years ago. So I think Evans at his best can beat up just about any cornerback, but specifically with Tom Brady there, we have seen Evans have a lower target floor than usual. You know, no Antonio Brown. I do think that we could see Godwin finally start flirting with one of those 12 to 15 target games that used to be, you know, a common occurrence with Jameis Winston under center. So with the idea that Lattimore at least makes Brady a little bit more afraid than normal to feed Evans, I think Godwin is just in a situation where volume should win out for a player we already know is great.
And no Antonio Brown in this game either. So this would have been, I would have told you that I felt like this would have been a major Antonio Brown spot, but now I do. I think a lot of those targets are just going to go to Chris Godwin.
I wonder if Tyler Johnson could be more involved. I think he's one of the better complementary backup wide receivers in the league. Last week didn't have a ton of volume, but I think he's a decent bounce back, low price punt play in DFS as well.
All right, there we go. All right, guys. I have told you about Pristine Auction before, and I am going to again here, but we also have a twist of what we are doing this week. To remind everybody, Pristine Auction is your go-to place for signed sports memorabilia, which goes into what we're going to talk about at the end here. This is your place that you need to get it. No matter what team you're looking for, no matter what player, this is your spot, pristineauction.com. If you use the promo code PFF, you're going to get $10 off whatever the first auction is, because it's all auction style, that you win. Not just the first auction that you bid on, it's going to be the first one that you bid. A lot of these auctions, guys, you start at $1. So you're looking at your favorite team, your favorite player, an autographed jersey, whatever it is, and it's starting off at $1. And you can get a real steal with it. You could also get $10 off if you use the promo code PFF. And what's different about this week is Pristine Auction is helping you guys get involved with the show and become winners just from watching, because we have a signed Davante Adams jersey that we are giving away. All you need to do to enter, tweet your best, hottest NFL take, college football take, whatever it is, and tag at PFF and at Pristine Auction. Sam is literally to my left right now picking up his phone.
Yep.
Sam, you are not allowed to win the signed jersey. I do have it here, actually, just so people don't think that I'm lying.
Ooh.
Do have it here.
And that's signed by Davante Adams.
Signed by Davante Adams.
Not you.
This is not, no, I did not forge
Okay.
this signature. This is actually Davante Adams' signature. We're giving this away next week. So, tweet at us, give us your best NFL or college football take.
And you don't have to be a Packers fan. You don't have to be a Packers fan.
You don't have to be a Packers fan. Literally,
jersey.
anybody can win this. If
Yeah,
you just happen to.
Right. We don't need all of our tweets the other day were Packer fan tweets. Like, branch out a little bit, folks. Get a great jersey, even if you're.
It's almost like Packers fans would be more motivated to win a Davante Adams jersey than
but I'm saying, like,
but Davante Adams is going to be like a Hall of Famer. You know what I'm saying? Like, anybody would want this.
Would it be if you're like a Vikes fan and you stole a Davante Adams jersey from a Packers fan? Like, or if you're a Bears fan or a Lion, there aren't any Lions fans left really other than Tage. But you know that. How sweet a victory would that be? You know, Packers might be 7-1.
Be incredible.
Your favorite team might be in the 1 seed driver's seat, but I got the Davante Adams jersey. Like, I feel like that would be great.
No, or like if you're a fantasy football fan and Davante Adams has, like for many people, just absolutely won you your league, and you get to now sign Davante. Look, it could not be easier to win this jersey. At PFF, at Pristine Auction, tag both those things on Twitter. Tweet at us your best NFL take. We also want to read some of these in the show. So Kendall's going to read some of them that we get this week. We're giving the jersey away next week, so you got some time to do it, but get in on it. First game preview that we're talking about. It's a big one. Got big implications. It's Kirk Cousins once again, as if we did not say enough words about Kirk Cousins, but I feel like we're going to say even more words about the quarterback on the other side because it's Dallas Cowboys versus Minnesota Vikings. And Dak is the big storyline here because he's got the injury that he might play. He might not. You'll just have to tune in to find out. It's a great teaser, but it's an awful situation for anyone that's betting on the game or that has fantasy implications on the game. So, I don't know. What do you guys think about this matchup here and where we stand with Dak Prescott?
I think it's very much unclear whether Dak Prescott's going to play. I know there were tweets.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Well, no, like there were tweets that were saying, that Thursday and Friday last week, they were saying, oh, Vegas is telling you that Dak's not playing. That's actually not true, right? So
explain to me, an idiot, why that isn't true.
Well, so Dallas was favored by as much as 2.5 at one point last week. I also think that's a good number to bet Dallas if Dak's playing and is healthy. That number got all the way to Minnesota minus 2.5. That was a 5-point swing. 5 points seems like a lot. It's not. It's what those points are worth, right? Not that many NFL games land on 2. Not that many NFL games land on 1, 0, or -1 or -2. That's about 8%, 9% of games. 9% of NFL games land on the favorite winning by 3, right? So 3 is really the one number that matters. And that number did get to 3 this weekend. It is now back to 2.5. So I do think so you're talking about 9%, roughly. When Russell Wilson got injured and, you had the look-ahead line against Pittsburgh, then you had the actual line against Pittsburgh, it was more than 20% difference between him and Geno Smith in win probability. So the Vegas is not telling you that Dak Vegas is trying to protect themselves a little bit, but they're not telling you that Dak's not playing.
I just love the different avenues that everyone had to try to determine whether or not he was playing. Like some people looked at the Vegas line, other people like me looked at my fantasy football app, and I was like, oh, he's projected for points. Yeah. He's playing. He's 100% playing.
Do you think it's close to like a 10-point swing going from Dak to Cooper Rush?
We make Dak about 7.5 points better than a replacement quarterback. Now, assuming Cooper Rush has never played before, so 7.5 is a lot, and that's the most. We have Brady and Mahomes at 8. That's kind of when we've seen historically Aaron Rodgers at his best was almost double digits. Like, it is a lot, and it is it depends upon what those points are. As I said, we saw in the Cleveland Denver game 2 Thursday nights ago, that went from 3.5 to 1.5. That was only a 2-point swing, but it went through 3, which is worth more than any other point in the NFL. So it's not so much the points, it's more of the win probability change and what points you're jumping over on the point spread. If Dak were announced out, I think Minnesota at home against Dallas would end up closing at maybe 6.5-point favorites. It would be immense.
Let's get Cam a jersey now. Get him on the flight.
Yeah, just to throw another wrench into it. Sam, you and I were talking about this before the show, and the Vikings and how they're getting after the quarterback. I think that it matters a lot, certainly for this game, because you don't know whether it's Dak who's handling pressure or if it's Cooper Rush who's handling pressure. And so, whoever it is, it feels like that Vikings defense is going to be coming after him.
Yeah, I think if Dak is playing, the Cowboys are obviously the bet with pretty much any line that's been happening over the last few days. With Cooper Rush at quarterback, it becomes pretty interesting, though, because the Vikings defense has started to look more like the Mike Zimmer defenses that we expect from him rather than the ones that they've had recently. They're top 5 in EPA per play. They're top 3 on third down. They're top 5 in pressure rate. But if you and you say, well, all that against a Cooper Rush-led offense, that could get ugly. But if you look at everything around Cooper Rush is really good. Those receivers are incredible. They have the number 1 graded offensive line in the NFL this year. The situation, Kellen Moore, play calling, the situation for the quarterback is fantastic, which is part of the reason Dak looks like Dak right now. Now, that being said, we saw the same thing happen last year when Andy Dalton came in and the whole thing fell apart. So it doesn't mean that it's going to happen that way. but there are reasons to still like a Cooper Rush led offense.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing here is the Vikings have not been a great run defense, right? And Dallas, because Ian really wanted Zeke to have a great year, they've back committed to that rushing attack. And like the Vikings are going to be without Michael Pierce. He's been one of their bright spots on defense, both rushing the passer and against the run. They're without him. They have not been great anyway. They got rid of Stephen Weatherly in a trade during the bye week. But then on the defensive side of the ball, I mean, Bashaud Breeland was their second corner, and he was egregious until they played Panthers, his ultimate slump buster for a corner. And Patrick Peterson got hurt in that game. So the starting corners tonight are Cameron Dantzler, a former third-round pick, a 4'7" guy, really, and Bashaud Breeland, who is probably a 4'8" guy if you watch him run. and so to Sam's point, if Dak plays, it's incumbent upon Minnesota to keep up with Dallas on offense. And if Cooper Rush plays, I feel like there's a Mike Zimmerification of this game where Kirk Cousins is confined and say, don't lose this game, right? They lost to Andy Dalton at home last year, on their way to going 7-9. So that game might play a lot tighter, in which case some of the skill guys for Dallas can come up and play well for Cooper Rush.
This does feel like a little more, in terms of the Cowboys' surrounding talent, more like a 2016 switch to Dak, where you had a great offensive line, you had a good defense, than something that happened last year where both starting tackles were out when Dalton comes back. We had, a thicker version of Zeke out there, I think you could say. The wide receivers weren't quite as established. I'm not saying Cooper Rush is going to resemble rookie year Dak Prescott, but this isn't quite the same dumpster fire that I think Dalton was just kind of thrown into.
Yeah, interesting question about this game. So we all know that Kansas City is last in the NFL in yards per play allowed. Which second worst team in the NFL in yards per play allowed is Dallas. They're first in turnovers generated per drive. So the question becomes in this game, which one of those is going to... We know defense regresses, generally speaking. So if you're really bad on an efficiency level, you generally regress as the year goes on. But we know turnovers regress quicker, right? If you're a Minnesota Vikings fan, that is the hope of this game.
Sure.
The hope of this game is that Dallas has been killing teams, turning the ball over. And if they don't do that, you can get yardage on them. You can move the ball on them.
This is the Trevon Diggs dilemma.
Yeah, Delta O'Neal.
He is fascinating because he will give you yardage. You can pass the ball on Trevon Diggs, but you have to know that anytime you do, if you leave the pass slightly behind on that route, it's going back for 6. He will aggressively attack the ball in the air, which works both for and against you. And so far for Dallas, it's been working for them really well.
You mentioned the Panthers as the ultimate slum buster for a corner, which is not the way that I think we thought we were going to be talking about the Panthers. Even if you didn't fully believe in their 3-0 start, here they sit, and man, they're going downhill quick. I mean, Sam Darnold just has not been the same quarterback that he was in those first 3 games, and the opponents are different. I think the teams are figuring out the Panthers a little bit more and what they want to do with Sam Darnold. But they're playing the Atlanta Falcons. It's a divisional NFC matchup here. Who among us was saying that we should not totally count out the Falcons? Wasn't it you, Ian?
Well, we did get some news just a couple minutes ago. Calvin Ridley out with a personal matter, so that is not
If you'll allow me to slowly walk back my take.
Oh, boy.
What do we think that is? I mean, it's because there's issues contract-wise, right? He's up for a contract.
I wondered at first because the first time it was London, so I didn't know if there was maybe some issue with the visa. I don't know. So
yeah, but right now the Falcons are in a precarious position because one of the reasons they made the Julio trade was because their salary cap was in such disarray because of the moves they made and all that kind of stuff. And the reason why they didn't draft a quarterback is because he would have to sit behind Ryan for a couple years and all this kind of stuff. And I wonder if that Ridley's been fantastic as his rookie deal, and he probably deserves a contract extension.
Totally. Yes.
And he's likely. I mean, it could be a situation where they're trading him, right? They could trade him to a contender, and with the deadline coming up.
Has that been a big talking point?
No, but the deadline is next week, right?
Yeah.
And you're looking at if you're a team that's willing.
Well, that's why Deshaun Jackson isn't playing this week, because that's publicly.
Exactly. You don't want to get him injured, right? Yeah. Yeah, but
that makes sense for trades, but I wouldn't have thought that with Ridley.
Well, because the thing is, for a team that wants to trade for him, so say you're a team that has a terrible cap situation, like Kansas City, who can use a wide receiver, and you're not able to do what the Panthers did with Gilmore and absorb all that deal. So you only have to give up a 6 because you're taking on all that salary. With Ridley, it's the opposite. It's you have the 4th year of a rookie deal with the 5th year option coming up, and you can absorb what is a modest P5 right now and give up a 2nd. And if Atlanta's going to get a 1st or 2nd for him, I don't know. I would, especially considering how well Kyle Pitts has played and how well Cordero Patterson have played, maybe it's a little bit more, palpable for them to trade him.
And particularly the way Kyle Pitts has developed, because he has become wide receiver Kyle Pitts, not tight end Kyle Pitts. And okay, we can play around with the definitions here and how much, but like they're moving him way away from being an inline tight end. Like his snaps in line have diminished every single week. He has become their number one wide receiver.
Well, in this Arthur Smith offense, it's weird, right? Because who have been the wide receivers that have done well in an Arthur Smith offense? It's more of those crossers. It's more of the yards after the catch. It's more of the big boy wide receiver play. I mean, Julio would be great for this offense, frankly. But like, it's
funny
not,
thing about that is
It's not those like down the field, big time, unrealized air yards guys like Ridley. Yeah. Ridley really thrived in the cutter offense, not so much in this offense. So maybe it's just a styles makes fight situation. I could be blowing that. I'm just coming up with it because the trade deadline's this week. It's not a personal matter. It's not an injury, right? It's very much, when the Jaguars left Henderson on the inactive list the week before they traded him to Carolina. It smells kind of like that.
Yeah, this is great. This is great content. Can't wait for people to clip that. So appreciate all that. When we look at this actual matchup, when we look at Sam Darnold, I mentioned like he's not the same quarterback that he was in the early start, but we were talking a little bit before the show on kind of just who he is, and over the last 4 weeks has not had a single passing grade above 56.
Yeah, turns out
that's just bad.
Turns out he's a bad quarterback.
And there were a lot of words that were said
How
about
could we
him
have seen this coming?
Right. There were a lot of words.
It feels like we should have known that already from the years we'd seen him play bad quarterback football from the whole way. Like, I hate it, right? I don't like Sam Darnold as a quarterback. I don't think he's good. But I think
Tell us how you really feel.
I think this is a slump buster for that offense. We've been talking about the other side of things. Yeah. But Atlanta's defense is still terrible. And the Carolina Panthers have some really good receivers. We saw earlier in the season that they went 3-0. They were able to do a lot of good things. Darnold graded better. The offense was more productive against some pretty bad teams. Nobody in the NFL has a lower pressure rate than the Atlanta Falcons. That should help the fact that Carolina's offensive line stinks, that Sam Darnold has a PFF passing grade of 47 when he's pressured.
Bad.
Like, all of the things that have been bad about this offense immediately evaporate when you're facing Grady Jarrett and nobody else.
We talk about bets on this show a lot. The best bet to make in this game is exactly what Sam is talking about.
See?
And this is, so total on this game is actually relatively low. It's in that 46. I actually don't know how it's responded to the Ridley news, but it's 46.5. With the Falcons favored by about 3, that's going to imply a team total of 21.5 for the Carolina Panthers. They have not gone over that other than the Minnesota game for a while. That's the over to bet in this game is Carolina's team total because of all the stuff you're saying. Still have good weapons. Without McCaffrey, they're going to throw the ball more, which means more points, generally speaking. And with an offensive line that's terrible, the Falcons aren't going to be able to do much with that. Joe Brady, still a plus play caller, and I think against Dean Pease's defense, I think they're going to have some success. I like Atlanta in this game, but I also like it to be more high scoring. I like the over generally, but I think the over to bet in this game is Carolina's team total.
So gross, though. It's like a movable force being a stoppable object going on here. Like, what we were talking for a show, like no one should have expected Sam Darnold to go from this garbage, atrocious, whatever adjective you want to use, quarterback, to good, but I don't know, below average maybe would have made sense in this offense. So just the fact he hasn't even finished above 24th in a single week PFF passing grade. I talked about the unrealized air yards, but we all know, a bomb from Sam Darnold isn't the same as a bomb from Mahomes. So using some of PFF's back end stuff, I looked at what incompletions were just completely uncatchable and the quarterback's fault. DJ Moore and Robbie Anderson, top 5 wide receivers. Like, when I think of Robbie Anderson, I think of Jesse from Breaking Bad. That he can't keep getting away with this. Like, that's what Robbie's going through.
Trevor, what was the weather cycle called in San Francisco last week? I feel like that's what a bomb from Sam Darnold is called.
The weather cycle? Yeah. I don't know.
What was that called again?
That was an atmospheric river, which is somehow connected.
Is that what they called? That's what they called it?
Yeah. Anyway, so like a bomb cyclone is what it was called.
Yeah,
that's what a Sam Darnold deep shot is called, a bomb cyclone.
Yeah, this is Sam, the bomb cyclone Darnold. Yeah. That's going to be his nickname here.
But I was going to say real quick, as bad as Darnold has been recently, we've kind of seen Matt Ryan do the opposite.
Matt Ryan's been awesome.
We were having some,
really good. Yeah.
We knew Ben Roethlisberger was washed after a couple weeks. We were wondering if Matt Ryan was on the same trajectory. 3 straight weeks, though, at the PFF passing grade of at least 88.
There are some plays where you look at him and you're like, Jesus, he's like that fumble he had at the end of the game where it's just like, come on, man. And there are some throws that look awful. But like when you add it all up, he's done really well.
Oh,
And he's done so in some cases without Ridley and with wide receiver corps that are like, and so we'll see if he can do that this week. Carolina, Stephon Gilmore's going to have a role today. It'll be interesting to see what it is.
Bills Dolphins is the next game that I want to touch on. It's a lot of divisional matchups going on this week. Dolphins are getting 14 points. Is that what it was? 14 points? I mean, this line would have been unheard of even like 4 weeks ago. Like this was for as good as people thought that Buffalo was going to be. For Miami to regress this hard, I feel, is a major storyline in this season. And if Miami does not at least look competent over what is basically the second half of the season, we're going to start basically questioning everything that's going on down there in Miami.
I think we already are. Like, it's 14 points, and somehow I still like Buffalo to cover that. I think Miami is the most disappointing team in the NFL this year on both sides of the ball. We probably saw some degree of offensive regression given the fact that they didn't improve that offensive line at all. And it's like, okay, you've got Tua. You might believe in Tua, even though last year didn't show you an awful lot. But how is Tua going to work behind the worst offensive line in the league? They're like, well, they're young guys. They'll get better year 2. Well, they haven't. So consequently, your offense stinks. The only way Tua can protect that offensive line, which, by the way, he used to be doing a pretty good job of. Like, the difference between Jacoby Brissett and Tua was the difference of how much Tua is protecting that offensive line versus Brissett. But the only way you can do that is by making the offense toothless that it doesn't go anywhere.
RPO dependent.
Right.
Yeah.
So it doesn't go anywhere, even though it's hiding how bad the offensive line is. But the defense is the thing that's been really ridiculous, given how much investment, particularly is in that secondary. The 28th in passer rating allowed, 27th in missed tackles, 26th in yards per play. Like, Buffalo's offense is really good, and unless Miami's defense remembers that they have talent, there's something.
Well, that's the point, like where I talk about Dallas, right? Like last year, we talked about this, I think, in week 1. The Dolphins were 25th in yards per play allowed. They were first in generating turnovers per drive, right? Like, generally speaking, turnovers regress. It's a function of the quarterbacks you play. Very interesting choice by the NFL. There's 2 games today that are rematches already within division. Kind of bold. Both of them are within the teams that were projected to go 1-2 in that division too. In this case, it's not a bad beat for the NFL since the Dolphins are not very good. We'll talk about Colts, Titans in a second. Interesting thing about this number, and it's big, road teams off of a bye are more successful relative to expectations and home teams off a bye. So I think the Bills here are getting an extra point or so on the point spread because of that. That's why it's a full 14. I don't think I could lay a full 14 here, but I think the number does reflect the difference between these two teams, which is drastic. No team in the NFL has lost more in their PFF power ranking since week 1 than the Miami Dolphins.
Ian, what do you think about this matchup?
What Sam was saying about the secondary, you paid Byron Jones and Xavier Howard to be your studs, and we were watching, that Tampa Bay game where we had Byron sticking on Evans, we had Xavier sticking on AB. These are the matchups you're paying them to win. Both wide receivers scored 2 touchdowns and go for over 100. So, Eric, I know we've done some stuff in the past showing that, coverage, if you can just be better at coverage than pass rush, you probably should prioritize coverage. You can always get the ball out faster in the pass rush. But I think now we look at Miami, they should have good coverage on paper, but not a good pass rush. And then we look at Washington, who does have a great pass rush, can't cover anybody. I do think it shows that, in this coverage versus pass rush conversation, you can't have a 0 in either. Otherwise, this is the result you get.
Yeah, I think so. I think what the key point about defense in the NFL, and not only did Miami sign those 2 guys, they drafted Noah Igbenogany in round 1. They've done some things on the secondary.
They've done some things with pass rush as well. You draft Jalen Phillips in the first round.
Yeah,
that's the thing. They've thrown resources everywhere.
The thing with defense is you just it is the point. The Dolphins actually, I think, prove it a little bit. Don't concentrate risk at any one player or any 2 players, right? It's the weakest link on your defense that I think matters the most, right? So, in your coverage, if you play a good enough quarterback, you can have 2 great corners, and the great quarterback's going to find number 3 and just eat him alive all game. In pass rush, you do have to have some sort of pass rush because, as Matt Patricia showed, you can't just drop 8 and rush 3 and expect guys to cover for 3.5 seconds. So there's obviously a symbiotic relationship there. I think the Dolphins, are hitting kind of the ass end of variance here a little bit with some of these guys, where you get great play one year, terrible play the next, and it's killing them because they don't have the pass rush to fall back on.
Is the number right on this game? What do you think about this? 14 is it's just so much. I'd be taking the Dolphins. points. It's too many points. There's just too many points for me. I don't know, man. It's a divisional game. They tend to be tighter anyways. Like Sam said, they have the talent. It's just that's so many points.
It feels like the last few weeks we've had a ton of these like monster double-digit spreads. Where do you know off the top of your head where?
No, there has not been a team this season that has won a game outright by being 7-point dogs. So every single team that's been favored by 7 or more this year has won.
Right.
And betting favorites in these big spreads has been profitable. Like you didn't have it, like the Detroit Lions are the one team that's been able to cover a lot of these, but for the most part, they have not been covered by some of these bad teams.
That's the point, is that it felt, without having any idea of tracking this stuff, that the teams that have been favored by these monster numbers have actually been covering.
It's just Dan Campbell's a unicorn, guys. Sorry.
I think if Miami has any chance of really keeping this one close, it just comes down to containing Josh Allen. For once, last 5 games, 35 points, 56, 31, 37. And 31 points allowed. I did find something interesting during the week, and I know this applies to most right-handed quarterbacks, if not all. They're better going to their right. That makes sense, and Josh Allen is no exception, but he's second in PFF passing grade, and then even relative to the other quarterbacks. So he's second in PFF passing grade, rolling to his right. He's 27th going to his left, though, and again, that is just pure ranking, not just hating on Josh for having to drop off like everyone else. So I do wonder, because Josh, he looks like a world beater against Washington and the Chiefs, but if there is, a moment where we can get him to take off that superhero cape, force him to play left-handed.
Yeah, it's weird though. Like last year's games between these two teams, the week 2 game in Miami, they kept it close. It was a 3-point game, right? Like the Dolphins covered all this kind of stuff. Week 17, when we all thought Matt Bitcoin Barkley was playing, Josh Allen plays and basically plays the whole game.
What?
If you haven't looked at Matt Barkley's Twitter, it's hilarious. And the Bills showed what they can do, which is just pile points onto this team. And I think if their defense doesn't click today, and it's I think odds are it won't. Josh Allen is that kind of guy that can just extend leads on teams. He's not a great. I don't think he's a great team to fade when they're favored by double digits.
Obviously, you got to pass well to beat the Buffalo Bills. I think that's what you got to do. To his last 2 weeks, he's been great in the 80s, so it's he hasn't been terrible, but the yards per attempt, it's at 7.6, so that's not exactly what you want. And it just, I feel like this season is so frustrating for Dolphins fans because it's creating the same questions that they were promised this season would answer one way or the other. Is Tua good? Is he bad? Is his offensive line good? Is it bad? Do we have the right guy at the helm in Brian Flores? Do we have the right guy at the helm in general manager and Chris Greer? And all of this, I feel like it's just more questions. It's the same ones. It's not getting answered.
I just wish we could even see if some of the questions they tried to solve were answers, because Will Fuller hasn't played with Tua yet. Devontae Parker is active this week, but right there, maybe even more so than Ridley. I think Parker is a possible trade.
Yeah, it's a good one too. Yeah. Although he has a bigger contract, right? It's tough, but
it is interesting that the 2 biggest strengths that Tua has right now are, he can argue right now is, I make this offensive line look significantly better than the other guy that was in here, and I make Jalen Waddle look significantly better than the other quarterback that was in here. He has shown that he will elevate the play of 2 pretty important parts of that offense. The problem is that it's taking him from by far the worst in the NFL to just bad. And with Jalen Waddle, it's okay, you have almost no interesting role in this offense whatsoever to now you're a useful part of a passing game that doesn't really function.
Yeah, I think the hard part about the Dolphins this year is it does show why expectations are so important, right? Because in 2019 they were rebuild, they were terrible, they were breaking it down. Last season, I think their win total was 6.5 going into the year. They win 10. And they win 10 games in a very fluky, Ryan Fitzpatrick throws a 40-yard bomb while getting face masks against the Raider. That kind of thing.
Well, that was expected.
Yeah, I mean, sure. It is to be expected.
Fitz being split.
But then, right. But then they miss the playoffs because Fitz has COVID in week 17. They can't go to him when Tua's trash against the Bills and all this kind of stuff. And it felt a lot like when Pioli and Todd Haley took over the Chiefs and they made the playoffs randomly at 10-6, and then expectations go up when nothing really fundamental about the team changed.
Sure,
you're still dealing with a second-year quarterback with a lot of questions. Your offensive line is still terrible. Your defense popped up one year, but isn't necessarily a world-beating defense. But their win total coming into the year is 9. They have second best odds to win the AFC East, and it's like these expectations, are they even reasonable?
Sure.
And are we going to fire Brian Flores in the public opinion over something that wasn't his fault, which is that he pressed the edge and had a good year when he wasn't expected to, and then in year 3 they sort of regressed like that. Those are always things I think to worry about, and why sort of some coaches don't get a fair shake. I think of Raheem Morris in Tampa Bay, same thing. Like year 2,
went 10-6,
yep. Wasn't that good of a team,
yep.
And then expectations go up. He's fired the next year. Like I think we have to be careful about writing off guys like Flores because they get the order wrong on their years.
Yeah, no doubt.
And as a team, they're now in this weird situation where to figure out where you go, you almost need to take the last 2 years as a whole,
them out, yeah.
Right, and figure out what's moving in the right direction and what isn't.
Sure. Kendall, I know we got a lot of inactives that have come in over the last half hour and an hour.
Yep.
What do we got here?
Yep. Hot off the press. So Browns, Odell Beckham, and Jadeveon Clowney are both in today. Colts wide receiver T.Y. Hilton is in. Lions running back Jamal Williams, he is out today. Trent Williams is in for the 49ers. Corey Davis for the Jets is out, but C.J. Mosley is in. And as you guys mentioned before, Calvin Ridley is out today with personal matters. Antonio Brown, that you guys touched on, Zach Wilson, and Julio Jones all are out. I think the biggest questions we've gotten today, if you guys want to touch on them, Antonio Brown, does that mean, Godwin and Evans eat today? And then Julio Jones, how important is he to that Tennessee offense?
I think Julio seems pretty important. I mean, it feels like obviously it's kind of like understating a really good wide receiver being in or out being important or not. But like when A.J. Brown, when Julio Jones, and when Derrick Henry have all been kind of themselves and available, the Titans look like that team that they've tried to scheme up where we're just going to be bigger, stronger, and better than you. And I feel like Julio, maybe not as important as A.J. Brown and Derrick Henry, but I feel like him being out still goes into this.
That number has moved towards Indianapolis. Titans were favored early in the week. Very similar move to Vikings Cowboys. Titans were favored. It has now shifted. The Colts being favored, and now the Colts are favored by a full 3 points. So if you like Tennessee, that might be a bet to make. Colts fully healthy. Colts at home. It's been a place that Tennessee has really done well in the Mike Vrabel era in Indianapolis, but it's starting to get hard with all these players, especially the important ones like Julio out.
And with the no AB note, yes, Godwin, Evans should get the majority of the condensed target share, but Tyler Johnson, again, we mentioned this before, I do think is one of those better number 4 receivers. So if Scotty Miller was healthy, then maybe they would rotate, but Tyler Johnson, if you're going to pinch in fantasy, you can get. And guys, no Jamal Williams, DeAndre Swift. Like, come on, 30 touches, get excited. Come on.
Somebody has to tell me what the Jets team total is because I'm betting under it. I don't care if it's negative. I'm still going to bet it.
So you're saying they're not going to be competitive?
They're not going to be competitive.
No.
You don't know confidence.
No Corey Davis. They're going to be like, what's that guy's name? Ty Johnson's going to get like 30 carries for 76 yards. Like, give me the team total under there in that game against the Bengals.
Literally the only thing that's gone right for Zach Wilson this year is that when Mike White came in, he looked worse. The worst. Like if Zach Wilson had been this bad throughout the first number of weeks, then Mike White comes in, the offense suddenly looks a little bit better. We've been like, oh no.
Here's a score against genetics. I will say Matt LaFleur, a top 5 play caller by our metrics. Mike LaFleur is 32 out of 32. So what the apples falling from the tree sort of were separated at some point.
I feel like you would rather want this though, right? First year head coach, first year getting the quarterback. You would rather not Mike White come in and make Zach Wilson look awful.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? I mean, like this is the right order.
It's been bad already, but it would have been disastrous if Mike White had come in and made Zach Wilson
look bad.
Well, Flacco
came in last year and looked better than Darnold for long stretches.
Yeah, that's Darnold. Don't talk about our prince that way. Don't compare Zach Wilson to Sam Darnold. I think that the biggest mishandicapping of the Jets this year for the people who were positive about the Jets was that like the LaFleur brothers would have similar effects on their team. Mike LaFleur is not.
You should have been able to tell just from looking at them.
What do you mean? You sound like George right now.
You got one guy who's being talked out as one of the most handsome coaches in the NFL, and another guy who.
That sounds like George.
Oh, come on.
That sounds like George handicapping a game. I'm going to bet on the good-looking team.
I'm just saying. Sometimes people know what they're talking about with these things. Look,
okay.
You try and look beyond the obvious, and it gets you into trouble.
Didn't Cowherd have the thing about quarterbacks who are handsome or something?
It's the backwards hat.
Nassim Taleb says
that is the backwards hat.
Nassim Taleb says if 2 people have the same stature in a company and one's ugly, the ugly person's smarter. But like. So we competing research here.
It's true, yeah.
You brought Taleb into
We've is that why you're a genius, Eric?
Wow.
Bam! Wow. Bam! Come on! That was for you, Tresh. That one was for you. He brings Tresh all the time on the College Football Show, so I had to get one in there.
Yep.
What a perfect segue to Western and Southern. Western and Southern is teaming up with PFF's very own Chris Collinsworth to give you insight that'll get you ahead on your fantasy and financial scoreboards. You want to hear more about Chris's old playing days or behind the scenes with Al on Sunday Night Football? How about the need to know whatever your financial future is? Now you can get the answers to both. When you ask a question to Western and Southern, you're going to be entered to win a fully catered party for February's big game at the end of the season. You can ask questions by going to westernsouthern.com/ask Chris. That's westernsouthern.com/ask Chris. And if you're watching this on YouTube, the link is going to be right below us. Remember, with Western and Southern, you can be rest assured on game day. Bucs and Saints. I know we've previewed this a little bit already with the Chris Godwin, will he eat, Mike Evans, Marshawn Lattimore matchup, but Jameis versus Tampa for the first time. It's not
No. The first 4 years of that deal were Jameis versus Tampa.
Oh.
This is actually factually correct. So Jameis in a different uniform versus Tampa now for the first time. It's not in Raymond James, so it's not quite, they're not playing the Diddy homecoming song before the game starts and everything. But what do we think about this matchup here? Because for as much as the Bucs look like a really strong contender in the NFC, Saints aren't going away. Saints are still 4-2. They're still right there within striking distance. And, hey, if they win this game, they're right there. They're right there with the Buccaneers.
Yeah, but it's such a contrast in where these two teams stand. Tampa Bay, they're missing AB. We're talking about Mike Evans might get completely shut down by Marshawn Lattimore. And it's which one of their number 3, 4, and 5 options are going to kill the Saints defense? And then the other side, it's the Saints have everybody healthy and nobody who can catch the ball. Their leading receivers on pace to get 750 yards in a 17-game season, and Jameis is actually playing pretty well. Jameis is actually exceeding expectations, and they just don't have anybody that can win in the passing game who isn't Alvin Kamara just making freaky things happen out of the backfield.
And as Sam said, with Mike Evans, facing a very tough matchup in Marshawn Lattimore, both historically and then just this year in particular, Lattimore has been playing some excellent ball. Devontae Adams, as you can see on our lovely graphic, just 56 yards on 7 targets. Terry McLaurin, only 46 yards on 11 targets. And DK Metcalf, if you take away maybe a little bit of an OPI there, certainly wasn't as big of an afternoon. So, again, this is why I just think more than anything we should see Godwin getting a lot more of that leftover volume.
This is the first time in the history of these two teams playing each other that Tampa Bay has favored in the Superdome.
Wow. That's nuts.
Yeah. And
it's 20 years, right?
They used to play a lot in the past. When the Bucs were wearing those creamsicle jerseys, they were almost always terrible. And the Saints,
they look good.
The Saints didn't make the playoffs until 1987, so they were always bad too. But they somehow were basically always favored at home at least. But the other thing that's interesting, and this is a little bit of a thing where maybe Tampa Bay's over it, maybe they're not. In both of Tampa Bay's Super Bowl winning seasons, the Saints swept them in the regular season. And so I do know that the Bucs have to take the Saints seriously here. But to Sam's point, does that even matter? Does it matter that the Saints just can't? The Bucs have no one on the outside right now that's healthy on defense, but can the Saints exploit that at all?
And it's almost do they want to? Because when you look at the Saints, they're positive in EPA per play when they're passing the football. They're 15th right now in their ranking in that category, but they are by far the lowest team when it comes to passing attempts. They're the only team in the NFL that has fewer than 200 pass attempts already through this season. They just don't want to pass the ball. And, I'm sure that Jameis and who he's been over the last couple of years, that goes into it. But also, my hat's off to Sean Payton, right? Because years and years and years, you developed this offense. You built this offense around the pass, around Drew Brees. And in a year, you just go, yeah, we're flipping it. We're a rushing team now. And here they are. They're 4-2. They're playing well. I just don't know if it's a script
not
that
to
can
beat
the
Tampa.
Bucs. I think that they will have to go against what they've been doing all year. And you're basically flipping a coin. Is Jameis just going to go off, or is he going to lose it for you?
I feel like we started to see a little bit of an identity shift post-bye, though, because Alvin Kamara, and every single fantasy manager that's had him on his squad knows this, 22 targets in weeks 1 through 5, 11 in week 7, first game after the bye. Obviously, they brought in Mark Ingram. That was always the big issue for me. Why are you trying to make Alvin Kamara this 20, 25 carry per game back instead of getting him out in open space more? Maybe that is the sort of security blanket that Jameis might need.
Yeah, and it was right. And actually, it was, he had games with no no targets at all. And then in the Washington game before the bye, he got a little bit more involved than last week, to the point where they were like double teaming him, which is crazy. This is not the team though to run the football against. So like for whatever reason, and I do think the linebackers for Tampa are a little bit. They go as coverage goes, right? They have brilliant games, and then they have games where they get turned around a lot. Like, I think this is the game where you say, okay, Devin White, like, can you be consistently good against Alvin Kamara? Because that's like their only way to win. I don't think they can win on the outside. I don't think they can win at the tight end spot. They have to be able to win with Kamara out of the backfield, catching passes.
Titans and Colts is the last game that I want to preview here, and all of a sudden, I think that most people would have told you, all right, the Titans are probably the favorite to win this down division, but we're halfway through the season. And because of the way the Titans are playing, they basically win against Indianapolis. They've pretty much got the division locked up. As long as they don't catastrophically implode down the stretch, this is a huge game because Indianapolis has to win it to stay alive. And Tennessee could basically put them away at this point. What do you think about this matchup, Sam?
Yeah, this has got to be one of the highest leverage games of the season so far. It means everything for the Colts. If they lose this game, they're pretty much done. And it means everything for the Titans. If they win this game, the division is pretty much wrapped up and they can start thinking about January. And we've been talking for a couple of weeks now about whether the Titans are due this letdown spot. They had that incredible game against Buffalo. Then we thought they might come down to earth against Kansas City.
Right.
But I think everybody is still giving Kansas City their best punch. Now you have a third one in a row where you have to stay up at that intense level because you're facing the Colts, who need this game to try and keep the division alive. I don't know how long you can sustain that. A famous rugby player once said that you can only go to that emotional well so many times in a season before it's just there's nothing there anymore. Yeah. So I wonder if that week is this week for the Tennessee Titans. And Carson Wentz has been playing really well. Like, he has.
If you ignore 4 plays against the Niners.
That's the thing. He has 4 turnover-worthy plays in the season, and 3 of them came in like a 3-minute stretch in whatever we call that thing, the atmospheric river in San Francisco.
The Sam Darnold.
Yeah, and if you take those away, or even if you don't, he's got one of the best turnover-worthy play rates in the NFL.
He's been great at taking care of the ball. I think the Matt Eberflus defense does such a fantastic job. And damning with faint praise, but being okay with terrible talent on that defense, and they've gotten a little bit. They've gotten a little bit better with some Darius Leonard's obviously great. He's been playing a little bit banged up. DeForest Buckner's fantastic as a player, but for the most part, you look at that secondary, not a lot of great players. You look
Julian Blackman out for sure.
The defensive line, and I mean you're looking at some players that they need to elevate themselves, especially on the edge. And yet they contain things, right? And the way that the Titans beat you is obviously with Henry, but Henry's kind of the closer. They throw a bunch of fastballs at the beginning of the game with Brown and with Henry running for 70 yards. And the reason the Colts have had some success against them in the past is they limit a lot of that. And in the game last year in Indianapolis, where the Titans ran away from it, it was because the Colts relented and gave up a bunch of big plays. The formula for Indianapolis is very much don't give up big plays on defense and don't turn the ball over. And so far Wentz has been that player for them. You wonder if that'll come back, because if it does come back, I think the Tennessee rolls in this game. If the Colts play that sort of confined game that they want to play, they can win it.
Is this line still 1.5? What's it at?
It's all the way out. The Colts are favored by 3 now.
Oh, wow.
I mean, Tennessee was favored. Yes, and I think a lot of the Tennessee being favored part was, when you look at Tannehill, Vrabel, that sort of era in Tennessee. Weirdly, last 2 years were 0-2 at home. And one of them was Mariota against Indianapolis, but then we're 2-0 in Lucas Oil. This year they bucked the trend. They won the home game against Indianapolis early in the year, but they are 2-0 against Indianapolis in that Reich, Vrabel, Tannehill sort of rivalry.
Feels like we're giving a little too much respect to the Colts and Wentz. He has been playing better, but you look at the last 4 weeks where we've seen a lot of these numbers come to fruition. We get the Monson game against San Francisco, the Houston Texans, enough said. Baltimore, who 1 week looks like a great defense shutting down the Chargers, the next week they can't slow down the Bengals, and the Miami Dolphins, who we've talked about plenty here. And
they lost the Baltimore game,
and they didn't
despite
even win
playing extremely well. Yeah.
I mean, if you just look at these two offenses, it comes down to who do you trust more between Wentz and Pittman creating big plays or Tannehill, AJB? I'm taking AJB.
Little history before we get out of here. Who's the last running back to win the Russian crown 3 years in a row?
Emmitt Smith, because it's on the show notes.
You looked ahead, you absolute devil, you. Yeah, 1991 to 1993.
What would analytics Twitter have done in '93 when Emmitt Smith, after a Super Bowl, sat out weeks 1 and 2 in a contract dispute. Dallas goes 0-2 in those games.
Yeah.
Jerry walks in, says, "We're paying Emmett." They go on and win the Super Bowl. He wins the rushing title despite missing the first 2 games of the year. I don't know. We would have been owned, I feel like.
Yeah,
we would have been,
right.
We would have been owned.
The interesting thing would have been how true is everything we know about running backs right now in 1993.
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk about you being able to run through, Patrick Laird being able to run through holes. That Dallas offensive line back in the day.
It was,
Newton,
it was
Eric Williams.
Didn't they pay Emmett a few weeks before Aikman even?
Yeah, I think so. And Aikman was an interesting one. But, Aikman never had more than 23 touchdowns in the season. Statistics back then were a little bit different.
Kyle Orton has 70 fewer career touchdowns than Troy Aikman does. It's insane.
Yeah. Kyle Orton did make that CBS graphic, though.
Yeah, that's true.
That's what it's all
Back
about.
to your history.
That's what. Yes. No. That's what I was always looking for, because Derrick Henry right now, he is by far in the lead to win that 3rd rushing title. He's got almost 1,000 yards on the season already. Number 2 in the rankings is Derrick Henry after contact. He almost has 700 yards after contact. But in all honesty, the second running back is the other guy on the other side of the field. It's Jonathan Taylor, and he's got just under 600. But it's. Derrick Henry feels like he's going to win this again in a landslide, and it's just we keep waiting for Derrick Henry to at least come back to earth, and it just doesn't seem like.
I wonder if the Titans win this game and they have that humongous lead over Indianapolis and everybody else in the division. Do they shut him down for a month?
I don't know if they'll shut him down, but
no chance.
I wonder how different. It wouldn't happen right after this game, but I wonder the further we get, even if they start splitting week series. Maybe we get into December and they're like, you want to take it easy?
They just lost.
Just take it easy.
They even had to put Darrington Evans, their 3rd-round pick last year, on IR. He just can't stay healthy, unfortunately. Yeah. I guess the craziest part about Henry for me, we usually don't see him do this until later in the season. It's not even winter yet. And if you look at him historically, 4 yards per carry in September, 4.4 in October, November, December, January, it gets absolutely horrifying,
Holy
ladies
cow.
and gentlemen. So, I believe it's October 31st still. We got Halloween fever. So I guess the Colts are okay for this one, but look the hell out in the future.
He was just ready.
South.
Yeah, he was just ready to get into it. Kendall, before we get out of here, what's YouTube been talking about? What do you got for
we've
us?
had a great day on YouTube, so I think you guys should just be jealous of that.
Wonderful.
It's been great. It's been great. But I do have a question for you guys, and that is that the trade deadline. There's been a lot of questions about it because that is Tuesday, November 2nd. Mm-hmm. So I kind of want to know what you guys think is going to happen at the trade deadline, or give me a person or a team that you guys are kind of going to be watching out for.
You mentioned the Calvin Ridley thing, and maybe it's not Ridley who moves, but you talked about the Kansas City Chiefs. They've been in talks for a pass rusher or a wide receiver. You look at Green Bay. Do they upgrade? Is there a contending team right now that you think there is I'll say a position group where you go, if they upgrade this, this is what they got to go after, this really takes them over to the top, this makes them go to the next level. What do you guys think?
Packers, another wide receiver would be nice.
That's
How about
the big
our
one,
guy, OBJ?
Ooh.
Get him wearing green. Just saying.
I think all these teams could use an extra wide receiver. I think the league is becoming awake to the fact that you need more than just one guy. There's a lot of wide receivers available. Brandon Cooks. Possibly
Brandon
OBJ.
Cooks made his grievances very known on
Devontae
Twitter.
Parker, as you said, there's a lot of guys who are disgruntled, and I think wide receiver is the perfect position for a trade, because it depends so much about how good your quarterback's playing, and you can change that obviously by changing teams.
And I think Brandon Cooks is the perfect one. One, obviously he's not happy with the situation there. Two, the Houston Texans have a fire sale on everybody on that roster. Yeah. They're trying to corner the 5th and 6th rounds of the next year's draft, because that's where the improvement is going to come. You could pick up anybody on that roster.
He's also relatively cheap for how good he is.
Yeah,
but guys, reports indicate they want to build around Brandon Cooks.
Of course.
So
It's the first team in the history of the league that wants to build around Brandon Cooks despite how good he is.
I'm just looking forward to 10 more Deshaun Watson to Miami reports, and then right after that, actually no, he's not going anywhere.
I'm so done with those.
It's the Zach Ertz to the Bills of the actual.
I think there's a better chance that Tyrod Taylor gets traded than Deshaun Watson before the deadline.
Who knows?
They are going to end up starting Davis Mills because there's no point for them starting Tyrod Taylor. And if you're a team that has a garbage backup quarterback, Tyrod Tayller's just shown that he can be still pretty good.
I'm pretty sure they hired the Chargers team doctor after they realized Tyrod was actually playing well this year.
You can't do that.
I just did.
You cannot. You can't do that.
Soon.
You can't do that. Now, ever since you said it, now all I'm thinking about is...
We're in danger of winning games. Can you...
Oh, jeez. Y'all are awful. Now I can only think about Odell in a Packers jersey.
That can happen.
Odell and Devontae Adams on the same team with Aaron Rodgers on the ball. I'm all into it. That's all I'm saying. Appreciate you guys watching the show. This was a lot of fun. Hope you guys had a lot of fun too. For Kendall Valenzuela, for Ian Hartitz, for Eric Eager, for Sam Monson, I am Trevor Sikkema. Thank you so much for watching. Enjoy Sunday. We will see you guys next week right here.